Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're finally going to be talking about the newest album from Panopticon, titled Autumn Eternal. So one of the things I've discovered in my expanding exploration of atmospheric black metal is that while there's a pitch black core of explosive tremolo picking and blast beat drumming to complement all those howled vocals, there have always been efforts to mutate and expand the sound. By now, most people know how Death Heaven drew on shoegaze and emo, but they weren't the first to draw forth more atmospheric textures in the music, like the ambient sounds of Wolves in the Throne Room, or the more blatantly pagan and progressive touches of In the Woods. So, what if I were to tell you about an American black metal project that didn't just blend in some folk and alt country, but bluegrass as well? Because in theory, it's not as far removed as you might think. After all, the fast-picked tremolo melodies aren't that far removed from the quick picks of a banjo. The key would be finding the right subject matter in order to marry the genres. And like most, when I heard about the one-man black metal project of American musician Austin Lund called Panopticon, I decided to dive in at the 2012 album Kentucky. And wow, I'm glad I did, because that album is something special. What immediately struck me about Kentucky was on a conceptual and lyrical level how much it really came together. A ramshackle presentation delving into the desperate poverty and bleak devastation of backwater rural Appalachia, ravaged by a flailing and heartless coal industry. Damn near perfect things for a black metal project. Now, in execution, didn't quite land as well. As when I dug the bluegrass and country touches, especially with the vocal snippets, the transitions always felt a little bit clumsy to me. I found myself underwhelmed by some of the black metal compositions themselves. Thankfully, a lot of this was cleaned up 2 years later for the frigid and excellent album Rose to the North, which brought in some symphonic touches with strings, great drum work, and fantastic atmosphere. What was also interesting was the shift in mood, where Kentucky was more immediately abrasive and confrontational, borderline punk. Rose to the North was more contemplative and wild, finding a certain tranquility in the frozen heart of the North. Where bands like Immortal and Satyricon wrote about Scandinavian wildness, Austin Lund was writing about the rugged American wilderness, with all the more eccentric instrumentation only adding to that authenticity. I'll be straight with you all. If I'd covered Rose to the North last year when it was released, it might have had a very real shot of making my year-end list. Yes, it is that good. So you can definitely bet I was going to be checking out his newest album, Autumn Eternal, apparently intended as the conclusion of a trilogy with Kentucky and Rose to the North, and with more straightforward black metal compositions than ever before. So what did we get? Honestly, I think I might have finally found a black metal album this year that really stuck the landing for me. As in, not just one of the best metal records of the year, one of the best albums of this year, period. And the funny thing is that for a relative outsider to the genre, this might be Austin Lund's most conventional black metal album of his trilogy, at least in terms of the genre crossovers, and yet there's so much dynamic power and color and soaring energy to the album that feels like only now we've hit the climax point of that trilogy. In other words, while I cannot and will not say that Autumn Eternal is entirely accessible for non-metal fans, it's one hell of an experience and one I will most certainly recommend. So let's start with the production and instrumentation. And you know, I'm so happy I covered Valendusk right before this album, because if I was looking for an example of how to nail this brand of atmospheric black metal production with the folk tinges and do it right, it would be here. Not only are the melodies prominent against the cacophonous drumming, but they cut right through the feedback of the riffs like crystal light through the clouds, harsh and occasionally shrill in their passage, but nearly always clear. I only found moments, a few, where they felt a little bit stifled, but that's more in service of the groove, which is driven by a very welcome and very prominent bass line. It alternates between a hollow rattle and a smoking gallop. And while there are points where the blast beats pile up to a frankly insane degree, the drumming is absolutely nuts on this album, there's also enough variance in the drum progressions and textures to really stand out, having some unique moments. From the circular hollow kick drum on Oaks Ablaze to the huge booming gallop of the title track to the ragged crunch of the cymbals all across this album. And while the guitars, they will scream from soaring melodies buoyed by reverb-touched symphonic swell to the whirling solos of Into the Northwoods and the superior Lament, there are so many little touches in the production that are absolutely wonderful, beyond just the intense atmosphere that opens up many of these songs. Windswept hills, the crunch of boots on stone, the crashing of waves and streams in the rocks. This is music of wildlands and Americana, the sort of wildness that comes from hiking in the untamed mountains, along with your thoughts as the chill of the wind tugs against your jacket. Not good, not evil, just inevitable. Rarely has an album's title so aptly encapsulated the sound so damn well, and while this album is easily the most metal of the trilogy, those elements of folk, alt country, and bluegrass are still there around the edges. The opening track in particular balances the dobro against a mournful and gorgeously textured violin, perfectly content to fade into ambient sound for a full minute before the album really explodes. That's one thing I really admire about this album, the sense of time and scale. Despite some fairly long songs, there's enough going on in the melodies and gorgeously executed transitions that keeps the songs from ever feeling long. They feel wonderfully cohesive here, and yet never so much that it feels cluttered or indulgent. For an album that opts to bring bring in as much symphonic, borderline cinematic swell as this one does, that's saying something. Take a song like Into the North Woods. It can easily be considered kind of kitschy how the song transitions from the explosive guitar solo to the outro of bells and the drums of a march, but the production maintains that huge presence so damn effectively that it feels seamless. Similar case for Sleep to the Sound of Waves Crashing. Even though I'm not entirely wild about the hollow lo-fi shift at the 90-second mark, or the odd tone that layers over the melody at the 3-minute mark, that ambient fade into the violin and how it gradually builds some aching swell with the rest of the strings, it's breathtaking. And then we have the ending track, The Wind's Farewell, which brings in those alt-country and folk elements with a progressive touch and an absolutely beautiful guitar line that maintains strident all the way through the massive riffs, especially how the deeper dobro tone takes the melody so perfectly that you have to wonder why it wasn't used more like that. It sounds great with this sort of metal. I will say the transitions are a little bit shakier when sound touches more against post-rock, like the faded out howls on the title track or the wind touch growl of the grooves in Oaks Ablaze, or especially on the Muse-esque melody of Pale Ghost. But really in the last case, I'd argue that's more of the track not really evolving in its melody. Solid song, to be sure, I do like it, but it could have been great. But now folks, we have to talk about vocals and lyrics, most notably the fact that I couldn't find a copy of them absolutely anywhere, mostly because they aren't included in any of the CD packaging because Austin Lund considers them too personal to publish in writing. Now on the one hand, that's really frustrating for me. I'm still not the best at deciphering growl or scream vocals, and Lund's full-throated howls booming across the mix only give me fragments to really work with. And here's the thing. He's such a powerful presence on these songs that I really do wish I could get more of the message, because previous albums, like Kentucky, show exactly how strong a lot of his songwriting is. Of course, there are places where he's not screaming or utilizing some impressive death metal growls, most notably in a Matt Berninger-esque timbre that feels even more swamped out in reverb than ever on Pale Ghost. It's telling that the one place I can definitely understand the vocals is courtesy of guest singer Petri Eskilian on A Superior Lament, singing about the encroaching winter and how we should empty out our souls. It's a telling line that when pieced together with the lyrical fragments that I could figure out, does manage to pull together a pretty striking lyrical picture with some of the themes. The coming of winter, endings, and death, screaming out our grievances in the empty waste, confronting the pale ghosts of the past that we do not wish to see again, but we must put to rest regardless. In a certain way, you really don't need to know which inner demons Len is facing with any sort of details in his writing. He's such a huge presence behind the microphone on this album that he can convey his trials and that emotional picture without it. By the end, you know he's found his peace. And that's saying something. In other words, you know, I think this might be one of the first times I've ever gotten so far behind an album so strongly without having a tight grip on everything that it's actually trying to say. But that itself says volumes about how incredibly powerful Autumn Eternal is. The compositions are dynamic and soaring. The musicianship is stellar. The production is awe-inspiring. And the presence and cohesion is damn near spectacular. Again, you're not familiar with black metal, this isn't exactly an easy place to jump on board. But Austin Lund manages to nail the ending of this Americana Touch trilogy so damn well. I'm inclined to tell you to try it out regardless. For me, it's a 9 out of 10, easily one of the best of the year, and all the more proof that any type of music can lead to unique beauty, and in this case, a certain sort of tranquility that I have to respect. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. We're coming up on the last months of the year. That means I do not have a lot of space to cover more albums. I'll be trying to get out as many as I possibly can, but no promises here. Till then, if there's anything else you want me to cover, or if there's anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.